The agenda this week assessed shifting relations between government and Labour, asked what Canada needs to do to up its innovation game, and glimpsed some of the complexities around Indigenous identity under the Indian Act and beyond. The Agenda's Week in Review begins with whether there's a crisis in policing in this country. Technically, legally, police services are supposed to come under civilian control. There's an oversight board, a police services board, that's supposed to be offering direction. Do you think the police chafe at that kind of civilian oversight?
I don't think it works very well. The oversight doesn't work. The police commissions, the police boards, at least in Ontario, and I think it's true across the country, are not very effective. They don't seem to really bring police in line. The example I always give is the city of Toronto, the Toronto Police Services Board here. And, in 2001, they were told by the Supreme Court of Canada they were strip searching many too many people. Well, they did nothing about it for year after year. They continued to strip more and more and more people until finally there was a government report in 2018 that said, you're strip searching 40% of the people who were arrested when most of the other police forces in Ontario are strip searching 1% of the people arrested. Still, the police board in Toronto said, oh, well, we'll just leave it. It was only last year, after the murder of George Floyd, that in fact the police service board in Toronto said, oh, we're going to change our rules about strip searches. 19 years it took them. Well, that's not a good way for a police board to function.
Civilian oversight of the cops, do they resent it?
Of course we don't resent it, and we also should not diminish the amazing work that John Sewell has done for many years. And John, you and I have a lot in common. I started policing in 1982 in the downtown core in Toronto, so I've seen you at many events. I've seen you certainly at the board, and I think it's too easy also just to say that this conversation really has only begun since George Floyd. You've been having these conversations with policing and commissions and oversight for many, many years, and we thank you for that. It makes us better. With regards to police oversight, and you also finalize your actual last paragraph in your book that actually speaks about the reality of the role of the Police Services Board, the role of the OIPRD and the SIU and the oversight. There's clear understanding in the regulations, certainly within strategic planning, but also within governance and oversight of police operations. It works. It's about the honest conversation. Your point, we are accountable to our board. Our board is a civilian oversight, which is made up of municipal and provincial and designated people. Our board here in Hamilton has 7 vibrant participants. Our chair currently is our mayor, and that's until the end of this week coming up. So no, we do listen, and we do not discount the direction from our government.
Mr. Sewell, sounds like he's killing you with some kindness there. We'll get back to some of your feedback on those comments from the Hamilton Police Chief in a second, but I want to bring Nana in here. We have been talking about the relationship between the police and various minority communities in this and other cities for a very long time now. I think I interviewed John Sewell on his first policing book back in 1985 or something like that. Is there any evidence that you see, Nana, that things are improving in that regard?
Well, thank you so much, Steve, for having me. And I'd like to echo the police chief's comments about Mr. Sewell. He has been a huge influence on my activism. As a baby lawyer, I remember joining the Toronto Police Accountability Coalition and just loving that there was an opportunity to engage with like-minded folks. I think in terms of, whether or not it reflects the reality on the ground, at the Black Legal Action Center, we hear every day from our clients, members of our community who have been overly targeted, scrutinized, overcharged, brutalized by violence at the hands of the police. And so we are really concerned that policing often causes more harm to our communities. And I think to answer that question, we need to look at what the statistics tell us. What the stats say is quite important. Police are more likely to stop and search Black people. They're more likely to charge our communities as compared to white folks. They're more likely to arrest us and more likely to use force against, seriously injure, and kill Black people. And these are recent statistics. So in fact, I don't think that it is getting better. I think once we look at the statistics, we look at what's going on in the world and the impact in our communities, it's not getting better. So something really drastically needs to transform and change.
Nana, is that the statistics you're referring to, are those post-George Floyd statistics? Because we've certainly heard that there's a massive conversation going on right now, a real zeal for reform is in the air, and that things are changing. True or false?
I think it depends on who you ask. What I'm saying is when we speak to our clients, we're hearing that it continues to happen. Those statistics are from the Ontario Human Rights Commission report from 2018 and 2020. And specifically about the use of force and the violence in our community, those are statistics from 2013 to 2017. So, what is actually happening on the ground may be very different for some communities, but what we're hearing from our folks is that it's continuing to happening. We're still being overcriminalized, overpoliced, and overcharged. So that's what we're hearing on the ground.
Jerry Dias, I want to put the same kind of question to you because you as well have been on a bit of a journey as it relates to this premier and this government. I do remember one time you said this guy's for the rich and he's got a track record of lying and bullying. And oh my goodness, we did find some footage, Jerry. We did find some footage. Sheldon, you want to play that footage?
You know, Doug, you.
Well, that was then. This is now. You've called the premier a likable guy, and as I say, you stood beside him at the $15 an hour minimum wage news conference. How has your thinking evolved on this government and this premier?
Well, look, if they do something that I agree with, I say so. If they do something that I disagree with, they certainly hear it in living technicolor, as you just showed. Look, the bottom line is we're not in control of who gets elected. I agree with a thriving democracy, and that means that the parties that I want to win don't always get elected. But what it also means is that in order to benefit working class people, I'm going to have to meet with the government and push the agenda. So I've been meeting with this government, I've been meeting with Monty, I've been meeting with the premier, and I've been pushing the agenda. I would like to think the increase to 15, albeit low, was as a result of us pushing. I would like to think about some of the legislation on disconnecting and some of the other things, including skilled trades, is as a result of the labor movement pushing. So, look, am I madly in love with all of the things that this government is doing? Of course not. Did I support them in the last election? The answer is no. But ultimately, if they are going to continue to do things and move in the proper direction, then I will give praise where it's due. I would like to think that I'm fairly balanced. But like I said, more times than not, they've heard the furor come out of Unifor, and that'll continue until they fix some of the things that I mentioned earlier on.
Well, let's actually fact check what you just said right now with the minister. Minister, can you tell us how influential, in fact, the unions represented on this program today and others have been in your thinking to change policy in Ontario?
Really influential. I'm proud of the relationship that many of us have. I mean, again, the first 3 months, I met with over 100 labor leaders, local labor leaders, plus provincial labor leaders. Again, where we can find common ground, let's work together and build upon that. And Jerry's right. We moved to $15 an hour after meeting with labor leaders, and we're moving to about $15.50 an hour come October. So it is a beginning. There's lots of work we're going to continue to do together.
Fred, I am curious as to what went through your head when you no doubt watched that news conference of the government unveiling its move to $15 an hour for minimum wage, and you saw the head of Unifor there, the head of OPSU there, Smokey Thomas. I know there have been other news conferences where Joe Mancinelli, the head of LiUNA, was there as well. What goes through your mind when you see these labor leaders standing beside the premier, the finance minister, Minister McNaughton, and others?
Well, while that was taking place, I was actually at the Ontario Federation of Labor Convention, where over 1,000 delegates from every affiliated union actually debated an emergency resolution that said we saw right through what was happening here. Let's talk about this $15 an hour minimum wage. It's like somebody stole your car 3 years ago and they're giving it back to you, although it's got way more kilometers on it and a few dents and scratches. You know, more than $5,000 was ripped out of the pockets of low-wage workers when this government, upon being elected 3 years ago, reversed a planned change to the minimum wage. They dragged workers backwards, and we still aren't back to where we would have been in 2018.
I suspect what I'm about to read is going to be like waving a red flag in front of a bull here, but I'm going to read something that's a bit in your face from Tobias Lutke, the German-born Canadian billionaire, founder and CEO of Shopify. And here's what he had to say about Canada's culture of competitiveness and some of the issues that we've been talking about already here this evening. It's just unfortunate truth that Canada is at best a go-for-bronze society, just in terms of its ambitiousness. This is why these amazing companies are being created and then sell way too early, usually to American investors. I want to find the best Canadians I can and tell everyone we are allowed to go for gold. Try to build a world-beating company. I'd like to know, Leah, why don't you start us off with this? Is he right that we seem to have we certainly don't have it in the Olympics anymore. We have an own the podium approach for the Olympics. But when it comes to innovation, are we still a go for bronze nation?
I don't know who is the go for bronze nation. The entrepreneurs I work with every day want to stay here. They want to build their companies. They want to build them to scale. So I think that we have the potential to be a go for gold. I think the challenge is that we sit around talking about this like it's esoteric and that we don't have any great examples of companies that could scale. And we do. I just don't think they get the limelight. They don't get they don't have the lobbying might. They don't have agency, to use the technical term. But and so how do you understand who those companies are? How do you raise them up? I mean, I can see companies in regenerative ag. I can see companies in water. I can see companies in digitally enabled clean tech as we apply AI to super energy, apply super energy efficiency to mining, for example. These are all things that I think Canada can lead in globally. And I think it's a question of how do we decide to support those gold for gold companies, and how do we, really identify them and help put the right supports around them. And I think that's something that Dan really speaks to, is that we haven't thought about it of getting to scale. We haven't thought about the fact that we need to have thousands of deployments of technologies or products to be able to then get into the other stages of innovation. And by focusing on novelty and single entrepreneurs and VC backed, we miss this whole understanding of what gold for gold really means.
Huda, can I get your view on that? Do you think you're part of a go for bronze ecosystem?
I don't, just for the record, I don't agree with most of what Toby says, but this one I do agree with him on. I do think there's a culture of mediocrity in Canada and in the innovation ecosystem in general. But I find it very funny that he's saying this, because when they listed, they picked like all American bankers. So I think it's a little bit contradictory that he's saying this. I do think Canada, has a culture of mediocrity for sure. And the companies have to fight uphill battles in order to become those sort of, Dot Health has global aspirations for sure. We do believe we'll be headquartered in Canada and, kind of build for the rest of the world. There's lots of companies that do that. But it is a lot more difficult than if you're surrounded by a mindset of winning, at all costs. Again, that comes with its own set of problems. But there's definitely this culture of mediocrity that I've definitely experienced here.
Ty, maybe you could follow up on that, because one of the things, and I think it's been referenced already in our conversation, one of the things we hear about Canada that makes it such a difficult place to go for gold is that we can't scale up the way that others in other countries can. Why is that?
So we can scale up the way entrepreneurs in other countries can. It's not a matter of can or can't you. We absolutely can. But it's more difficult. I think, the reality is at policy level, we touched on this a little while ago, is the battle, 10, 15 years ago is how do we move ideas out of the research bench into startups? And while it's not perfect yet, we need to do better. We can do that. Today's battle is, how do we scale these companies? How do we lead them? How do we finance them? How do we market and sell them? We can absolutely do that. But a lot of the people at the policy level are fighting just like a general fights the last battle.
For years, you tried to get status as a member of the Algonquin of Pikwakanagan First Nation. How did you come not to have that status in the first place?
So I inherited sex discrimination. It was an intergenerational inheritance. My great-grandmother was removed from Pikwakanagan in the 30s with her children, my grandmother being one of them, because of issues around sex discrimination. Because her lineage came through, her husband, his lineage came through, through his mother line. So his name was Joseph Gagne, and my great-grandmother was Annie Jane Maness. They were both Indigenous from Pikwakanagan, and they were removed because of issues of sex discrimination in the Indian Act.
Well, in fact, you shared a letter that your great-grandmother received in January of 1945, and we're going to put a photo up of it right now, and it reads, "Dear Madam, I am in receipt of a copy of your letter recently sent to the Indian Affairs Branch, Ottawa, with regard to your status as an Indian. In reply, I wish to inform you that you are not an Indian as defined by the Indian Act. At the time of your marriage to Joseph Gagnon, a white man, any rights you had as an Indian of the Golden Lake Band ceased, and you became a white woman." And then, pathetically, it signed yours very truly, H.P. Ruddy, Indian agent. Just talk about the impact that a letter like that would have had on your great-grandmother.
I never had the opportunity to meet my great-grandmother. I know that when I received it in the mail from an archivist, it floored me, like really floored me. I'm happy that you read it and you didn't ask me to read it, because it's a pretty emotional letter.
But what's or I guess not interesting, what it demonstrates is that men don't lose their status if they, quote unquote, marry out, but women do. Have I got that right?
Well, that was prior to 1985. That was the case, and now you don't lose status or gain status through marriage. They changed that in 1985, and then they also, of course, incorporated new forms of sex discrimination in the Indian Act in 1985.
Talk about that. What does that mean?
Sure. So in terms of Gehl versus Canada, I'll just limit my discussion to there. So prior to 1985, they had I'm going to call it a wonderful provision that protected children of unknown and unstated paternity. When the man or the father wasn't known, the child was a status Indian like the mother. But in 1985, what they did is they secretly took that out and became the Indian Act became silent on that very matter. And then at the level of policy and practice within the Department of Indian Affairs, they were harming those children. They were ruling or making decisions that in essence meant the man was a white man, and then these children were being denied their Indian status registration. So that's what happened in 1985. There's other forms of sex discrimination that were created as well. But what's really disturbing about that situation is it's often said that the Indian Act was amended in 1985 to bring it in line with the Charter, and it just completely failed to do that. And actually what happened was the legislative change opportunity became an opportunity to create new forms of sex discrimination, which is horrific.
Veldon, blood quantum, what is that?
It's a really insidious form of constructing an arbitrary cutoff on who's Indigenous and who's not. So for the longest time, and even there's sort of in a de facto way, the Indian Act has a blood quantum. It doesn't come out and explicitly say it. So basically it is a quantum. It's a quantum measurement of blood. It could be expressed in percentages or fractions, so degrees of being mixed. In the Indian Act, as it currently stands from the amendment in 1985, is if you mix, and it's a larger discussion too, but there is a calculus behind it. If you mix too many times, and what we understand now being the second generation cutoff, so if you have like a status Indian who mixes, there's two generations of mixing with non-status, that's the end of it for status itself. But you'll hear sort of turns of phrases of being I'm a full-blooded Indian, or I'm half, or they may be off the cuff themselves, but when they're worked into citizenship codes and membership, or at least the statutes and the laws that are imposed upon us by the state, it's very insidious. It's what you might call, and it's used another turn of phrase amongst ourselves, arithmetic genocide, is that it just basically creates the terminal end of when you've breeded yourself out of existence.
Catherine, what's your view on it?
Yeah, I agree. In order to continue to exist as peoples, you need a bunch of things. You need territory, you need culture, you need language, but first and foremost, you need people. And the Indian Act status regime is systematically and methodically and intentionally reduces the number of people down to nothing in some cases. So as I said earlier, I don't want to make either my own citizenship, my children's citizenship, or my nation's ability to claim us subject to that. And the path, of course, is for is for nations to reclaim jurisdiction, exclusive jurisdiction, about how they define citizenship, and the rights and obligations that come from citizenship. And it'll be different. Like I know with Haudenosaunee nations and the citizenship regimes around there, they're very different than what I think the Secwepemc citizenship system and law and jurisdiction, how that would be exercised. And that's as it should be. We are different people. We have different laws.
Gahande, I suspect there are many white people watching us right now who assume that there are great benefits to having a status card. And I wonder if you could weigh in on that and tell us if that is in fact the case.
It's just a card. Many people think that the card gives you great benefits in terms of tax reductions and whatnot. It really doesn't. Like anybody else, I pay taxes. I work here in Ottawa at Carleton University. That card really doesn't help me in terms of reducing, purchase price on items and things like that. And to me, that tax card is a symbol of colonial occupation. It's a symbol of the oppression of our people, and we are forced to take that. We are forced to apply for these cards and prove who we are in that system, in that other system. But it really doesn't do very much, and it seems to have a lot of weight in terms of non-Indigenous eyes and those who covet them.
That is some of what we considered this week on the agenda. For more, including the full conversations, you can always visit our website. That's tvo.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed. That's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.